as you know, we've done this before. We're gonna do it with my little nice book cam, which I have here. Look at that. Ah, this is so pretty. So that's my Doom guy here as well. Is having fun as always. So today we're going to continue with the book streams. It will be visual effects related, of course, but it's not really about visual effects. For me, the reason why I started with these books, the reason why I started with photography and lighting is because I truly believe that photography is the pinnacle, the most important thing that you need to learn as a visual effects artist. You know, if you don't know photography, you really don't know, you don't have the basis of knowing lenses, of knowing cameras, of knowing like composition, lighting. It is so important, and that's why I started, instead of starting with like visual effects books, I started with what I feel is the most important thing in the world, which is photography for visual effects, and also of course lighting as well, and of course we step in a bit in color. Now these books are still a bit basic, okay? I just wanted to let you know, but we're gonna start with this book. Some of you might already know it, but we're gonna talk a bit about it. So this book is called Light for visual artists, of course. That makes perfect sense for all of you. And its subtitle is Understanding and Using Light in Art and Design. This is a book by Richard Yot. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. So I have a bunch of marks here, as you can see, with little papers. And I want to talk a bit about this book because this book has been fundamental for the development of my students, and it's also been fundamental for the development. I've always told my students to get it, and of course you don't need to buy it in paper. Of course, you can buy it on PDF, you can buy it on Kindle. You don't, like, all the books I'm showing can be bought digitally. You don't really need to like do it like this. Okay, let's get this going. So I'm gonna start, of course, by the index so we can talk a bit about it. So obviously we have part 1, part 2, 3, and it starts basically with lighting fundamentals. We have basic principles, light direction, natural light, indoor, you know, all those things. And then, of course, we have people and environments. Then we have creative lighting, which is one of my favorite chapters. Now, the whole point of this is that the reason why I really want to focus this, and of course, lighting artists should read this book, but compositors, I really feel like they should, because a lot of people ask me things like, you know, what is an indirect light? When they get the UVs from compositing, they ask me like, oh, what is an indirect light? Oh, what does that mean? What does an indirect specular mean? What does, you know, and these kind of books really help you to have some notions of what those things mean. So that's the chapters we're going to go. Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk about the whole book because I would much prefer for you to support Mr. Richard here and support him with the purchase of the book. But basic principles. And remember, I was always telling you, like, how do light behaves, you know, and especially graphics like this where it talks about what a bounce light is, what a skylight is, what sunlight is. You know, these are really important facts. Of course, it goes a bit deeper. It talks about like red photons and blue photons. It kind of like just basically gives you the notions of radiance, for example, which is really important for visual effects, and for also, of course, it talks about white balance, you know. It talks about, like, it gives you some exercises as well. It already talks about 3-point lighting as well. And of course, lighting direction. I hate these CGs that they have on the book, by the way. They are horrible. Look at that. But it gives you a lot of examples of light direction. I mean, this obviously, it's like a no-brainer, but it really makes a huge difference for you to kind of actually look at these examples and then try to incorporate this into your work, especially if you're a lighter, especially if you're a compositor as well, you know. Also, the very importance of, you know, setting up lights from above, setting up lights from below, the difference of actual dramatic notion that you get from these types of lights. This can, of course, be done by a flashlight, but it really conveys a huge story. Like if you look at this person, for example, he looks so much more calmer and he looks very introspective, but then in here, he looks very evil, you know, the typical like film noir light. We're going to be talking about film noir in a minute. I have a book about that as well. But this is really important. Now, obviously, one of my favorite chapters of this book as well is the chapter 3 with natural lighting. And this is fundamental for any compositor and lighting artist. Again, the book goes really into detail of examples. It shows you multiple photos that you can test. Also, of course, at any time when you look at these examples like this one with dust and this one with sunset, I really would advise you to always go and get your camera and go ahead and take photos and examples. That is so important. Even like this, trying to capture dusk light, trying to capture haze as well, and even like working in haze in Nuke, trying to get haze by using depth passes and things like that. Obviously, the book keeps going. I'm not going to spend much time on these. I want you to buy the book. I don't want you to like watch the book live. Otherwise, the person that is selling the book, like Richard, I'm sure is not going to be happy. Now, let's jump in here to this one. So obviously, this is one thing I really wanted to talk about. Like, first of all, in here you saw let's go back a bit here. We talk about natural lighting, right? And this is something, a topic that I wanted to discuss with any VFX artists in the chat here. A lot of people have this notion that the only way to light, if you have an outdoor scene, is to just use the natural light. That means that a lot of people just kind of feel like they can just use an HDR to light, or they can just use just one source of light like the sun. This is really further from the truth. And as you're going to see on the next book that I'm going to talk about, which is a book called Painting with Light, you're going to see that most of what you see in movies is fake. Most of what you see in movies is completely fake. It's done with multiple lights, it's done with bounce lights, it's done with reflectors. As I was saying, people have to stay away from this notion they can just use an HDR or they can just use one single light. And this is why I love this chapter, the indoor and artificial lighting, that really talks about how to deal with multiple light sources and also bounces as well. Anyway, what I was going to say is that most of the books, most of the photos that you see in commercials these days, they're really not done in a realistic fashion at all. They're done with multiple lights. Anyway, and if you really want to have like a workshop in amazing lighting, and especially lighting done by natural light sources like candles and torches and actual fire sources, you should really look at this film. This is Barry Lyndon from Stanley Kubrick. So this is the special edition from Criteria Edition. This film, this is not the cup of tea for everyone. Obviously, I know this film, it's like a period film. It's a bit long, it's a bit slow, and it's really not going to cut it for the 2020 type of audience that loves fast-paced films. This is not a fast-paced film. But if anything, this film really showcases a complete workshop in lighting done by Stanley Kubrick and his DOP as well. Now, the cool thing about this Blu-ray is that it has obviously multiple interviews and multiple audio commentaries, and of course also interviews with the cinematographer John Alcott. As you can see here, it just looks stunning. And if you want to watch, even if you just want to watch it for the photography itself, you'll get very highly inspired by this film, I think. The film, of course, has not aged very well in terms of story and momentum and pace, but you should really look into it. It's one of my favorite films from Stanley Kubrick, especially because it's a work, like it's basically a masterclass in lighting, and all sorts of types of lighting, especially fire source lighting, using candle lights and of course sources of torch and fires like you just saw here. Obviously, to understand this film is from the 70s, so there's no computer, and there is no visual effects and also no matte painting. This is all shot for real, basically where the cinematographer is waiting for the stuff to happen so that they can actually light it. So if they need like a landscape with a certain types of clouds, they just need to wait for a day that has that. So you see, these are the shots I'm talking about. These are entirely lit by candle lights. It's just absolutely amazing. I think there's a couple of more. I'm just gonna scrub to a couple of more shots here so we can see it. And just look at this. This just looks literally like a painting. So if you can ever achieve this kind of lighting on your CG scenes, I'm sure you're going to be hired immediately. Okay? Immediately. And of course, while we're at it, you should probably look into Paths of Glory from Stanley Kubrick as well. Since that film is all in black and white, and it's also a masterpiece in photography. But I'm not going to waste more time on it. You should look at on this film a bit later. This is also the Criteria edition that has a multiple special editions and multiple. The reason why I still buy discs, and I know most people are always asking, oh, why do you even buy discs? Because you can just buy this all digitally. And I know this is a hassle because it takes space on your shelf, and it's really, not really what we do these days. But the only reason why I buy these things is because of this. Like, look at that. It has an audio commentary from a film critic. It has audio interviews with Stanley Kubrick. It has a television interview with Kirk Douglas. It has multiple video interviews with executive producers. It has like so much material that you will never find online, and especially you will never find streaming apps. The same goes for Barry Lyndon here. Just look at the amount of things that they have. Not only this is a restoration in 4K, but it has like, documentary with the cast and crew. It has interviews with Stanley Kubrick again. And again, Stanley Kubrick is not an easy person to see on interviews. He would never do interviews. He was always very much not a guy that liked to do interviews at all. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter that I want to discuss. Of course, you all obviously have chapters about reflections, about surfaces, I'm not going to go into this, like you need to buy the book and read it. That's the main thing I would say, but I just want to jump around here a bit for a chapter that I really like, which is this one, which is very en vogue right now because of RTX and because of real-time ray tracing. And this is diffuse reflection, which, and again, I really think that these kind of books really help any composer to really try to understand what the AOVs do. Anyway, as I was saying, RTX is now really in vogue. If you really want to be a composer and you want to understand all the AOVs and all the passes you get from 3D, you should really read this book and especially learn about all these things. I'm gonna just like wrap up this book because I think we should move on to the next book. Also, in here it really explains really well everything about direct reflection, which would be the direct specular that you usually get from Arnold or you get from Redshift as well. So it kind of like goes through and how it works and how it exactly exists on nature as well, which is really cool. And then, last but not least, this part, which I think is incredibly important. People really neglect the way that you should light characters and people. And again, for me, like I was saying, like you kind of always want to look at the masters, okay? Like I said, watch Barry Lyndon, watch Paths of Glory, watch more films, watch films that have outstanding photography. What you could do is you could just go into the Oscars website and actually check every single film that won the Oscar for cinematography and go and watch them, okay? It's really important for you to do that because if they won a cinematography award, that means their film looks amazing, so. Now, Chapter 11, Light and People. As you know, the way light bounces. Now, the cool thing about this book is that it shows multiple examples of the same exact surface with different lights. It shows you different facial references, race and gender as well. How hair really affects everything in terms of lighting, of how it changes the dynamic of the lighting. And then, of course, we could just keep going and on and on. I'm not going to spend more time on this book, okay? Because I just feel like just going to wrap up with creative lighting, especially stage lighting, which is really important. With you basically doing, this is where all the fakery goes on. And of course, it has multiple examples from multiple masters of painting and also masters of cinema. Especially, I would really recommend you to watch the one on the bottom here, which is Nosferatu from Murnau. Nosferatu from Murnau is basically a masterclass in lighting and direction. You should really look into it. Anyway, and again, Kubrick and Blade Runner and all those things. But just go and buy the book. Let's just not waste more time on this. You need to go and read this book. If you are a composer, you should read this book so you can understand lighting, so that you know what the lighting artist is giving you. That means that you will grasp the full understanding of what the AOVs are, what indirect specular are, what everything that the actual CG artist gives you. If you're a lighting artist, this gives you multiple examples of how to light your shots, and also gives you references of films you should go and watch and read, okay? So I really advise you to buy this. Now, this book is, I'm just going to jump into the books. Now, this book is really important for me, okay? And I know this book is a bit old, okay? It is very old, but this is a book called Painting with Light, and this is a more advanced book. It's mostly like a mix between interviews and articles, so this is Painting with Light from John Alton. And okay, John Alton is an amazing cinematographer, mostly from film noir. Okay, so he is, of course, he's done films, not now anymore. Like we're talking about films from the 60s, 70s, 50s, things like that. And the cool thing about this book is that it really shows you how his strategies are, how the strategies exist into lighting scenes with conventional lighting and especially flags as well. And this really connects, this book for me connects to a keynote I saw last year at the M3 conference from Eric, the director of photography of Pixar. He was the director of photography of Incredibles 2. And if you want to watch his talk, it actually still is online, I think. So Eric Smith, really, really nice guy. And if you want to watch this, this is Eric Smith, director of photography at Pixar, and he's talking about the cinematography at Pixar, but also talking the cinematography of Incredibles 2, okay? This talk is also amazing. He shows some of the references from Pixar animation. He shows how they actually work, You can still watch this. I don't think it's on YouTube. You should watch it soon because of streams. And he also talks about this book a lot, and it's been a huge influence. And if you watch his stream, he actually talks about how to use the typical tools you find on set. Just gonna show you. So this is a painting with light from John Alton. This is of course an introduction by Tom McCartney. And why is this so important? Because John Alton really revolutionized photography in the 40s and 50s, okay? Because he was probably the most recognized director of photography for film noir. So he's done so many films, he's won so many awards, and his filmography is so big. I'm not even going to waste my time trying to tell you this. But now this book, of course, is very dense. You probably shouldn't read it all in one go. But I want to show you some of the images of this book, because the reason why I like it so much is because of this. Because it really showcases, how do they film on set. And obviously, I know this is old. This is from the 50s and 40s. But things haven't changed that much, especially in the way that it even, as you can see here, even has graphics of where to put lights. And this is incredible information for you to start bringing in this type of techniques into your CG scene. So that when you have your CG scene, you kind of want to make sure you put the lights, in the same kind of positions. If, for example, imagine if you're trying to do a film noir, it kind of has even graphics here of where they should have the lights. And it even goes deeper to this. And this is why I was referencing Eric's talk, because Eric at Pixar, you see, I don't know if you've been on set many times, but this is, for example, what we call a flag, right? So these are really handy. We have flags with C-stands. This is still, even on this is 40s and 50s. The cool thing about this book is that these kind of things still exist to this day. We still use C-stands, we still use flags, and we still use these kind of things. And flags are incredibly important. They're super powerful because they can block light. It's basically the opposite of a reflector, right? So when you put a flag, that means you can block a shadow, you can block a light source. Flags, incredibly important. And people really don't use flags because that's how we shoot. If you ever have the chance to go on set, you should really try to go on set, because going on set means that you'll see how they use these things. And again, same thing here, the power of reflectors, the power of targets as well, the power of half targets, and all these little things that can really be modeled, and you can kind of massage lights with it. Because if anything, you guys need to understand is that lighting in a film is all fake. Everything is fake, okay, guys? Just look at these ones. These are really good. These are what we call in the industry a cookie, so that you can kind of break up light. And it really helps you to break up the diffusing of light, so that when you have light on a face, it breaks up in the shapes of the face. So again, this book is amazing. You should really, really go into it. And I'm just gonna show a couple of more pages here. Obviously, some of these things are a bit old. Obviously, you can't really judge lights anymore like this, because these are lights from the 50s. But it doesn't really matter. That's not really why I want you to go and watch this book. It also has a really nice chapter about the theory of illumination. This is one of the best cinematographers in the world, so you should really read what he has to say. It gives you some examples of some graphics as well. I want to show you some of the graphics here. These are invaluable, and I know the American Cinematography magazine also has these kind of things as well, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But you see here, so if you are a CG artist, if you are a lighting artist, it is really important for you to understand that lighting should be handled like on set, so that you start staging lighting just like professional photographers do and just like professional cinematographers do. That's why I keep saying that people need to read cinematography books. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap up this book because obviously this book has a lot of stuff, and I you know, again, I would much prefer for you to actually buy the book. I think I'm going to just wrap up. Funny about this, I just want to show you this really briefly because this is really funny. So this is how they used to rig a car so that they can do back projections, you know, so that they would have the actor there and then on the background there would be a back projector. And they even like talk about how back projectors work, you know, how to do back projectors. And the funny thing now is that we're now working like this. This is on the 40s and the 50s, and we're now, it's like we came full circle. We're now doing rigs like this, and then we're doing back projectors, just like on The Mandalorian, you know. Obviously, the back projectors, instead of being film, now they're LED panels, and they're like like video panels. And I find it so funny that we kind of went full circle, and now we're back at what we used to do on the 50s. I just find it hilarious. Anyway, very useful information of how to do the famous Hollywood close-up, especially here, as you can see here. These are quite nice. I like these drawings. I like these technical drawings. Anyway, I'm not going to waste any more time on this book. Painting with Light, John Alton. So have a look at this book. It's not very expensive. You can also buy it on Kindle. This is a black and white book, so you can definitely watch it on Kindle, okay? I'm going to jump the gun, and if you want to have more schematics, you should maybe consider this. The American Cinematographer magazine is a magazine that has been going on for decades now, and they basically just basically are the best in the industry for cinematography. Now, I have been subscribed for them for years, and they have a lot of schematics. So I'm just gonna just give you like a couple of rundowns. And here, of course, they talk about like Mandalorian. The one really good one is the one about the 1917, which is like almost shot in one single take. Obviously, I also would say that the It Chapter 2 article is amazing as well. Now, the cool thing about American Cinematographer is that these magazines exist digitally as well, so you don't have to have the physical one. Black Swan is also a really good article as well. You don't have to have them physically. You can actually have them digitally. The cool thing about the physical version as well is that once you can have both. You know, you can have the physical and then you get the digital version as well. So Social Network, also a very impressive article, and of course Games of Thrones. Now the cool thing about this is that it actually has schematics. I'm just going to show you real quick here. It becomes really handy having this magazine if you're trying to light a scene and try to use a film as a reference. You know, so for example here, this is an article about Black Swan. The cool thing about this is not only the debates on how it was done and how they filmed it, but look here. Obviously it has, you know, first of all, it shows you how they set up the lights, things like this. You actually have photos from the set of how they produced the light. And as you can see here, this is nothing more than a floodlight on the ceiling, which is something Roger Deakins does a lot as well. And then kind of like just have the rest of the lights bounce around. And this is a very easy to do in CG. You know, you can definitely do this in CG for sure. Again here, really, really cool to actually show you how they set up the lights. So you see here, this is a scene from the film. You can clearly see what they've done there. They have a huge floodlight with diffuse on the right side. Then they have a reflector, white reflector on the right side as well. And all the light just looks very natural bouncing to her. Invaluable information of how to do this. Obviously, Cinefx has this as well. But the cool thing about this magazine is that it actually shows you how they set up lights and scenes. And I think for me, the most important piece of information is this. At the end of the articles, they always have this. Look, this is amazing. It actually tells you what camera they used. It tells you which lens they used. It tells you what type of film they've used and what was the print as well. That means if you want to match a look of a film, you can watch this magazine and actually see what lens they've used. So, for example, if you want to try to mimic one of these shots, you can then use a 240 to 1 aspect ratio with a Super 16mm camera, and then use an ARRI Ultra Prime 16 on the camera, which is really cool because then you know exactly how, and then you can like construct these cameras in your CG environment, you know. I think that's why I love this so much. Let me just show you another one here. I know this is not a book. It's a magazine. I know that. But David Fincher, which is one of the best directors in the world, and how he did Social Network. I'm going to just go in here. Really great way for you to actually see how they actually lit the interior of the car with a blue screen. And this is invaluable information for you to have as a visual effects supervisor or even as a CG artist, because if you're trying to do a car set, you can probably mimic some of these things. Always try to mimic the masters, you know, that's always what I think. The cool thing about this is that it even has schematics of how they filmed something. They have the schematics, the top views of the maps of how they actually set up the traveling on the film. Because this is very common, you know, they have like the pathway of the car, exactly where it's going. This is really cool as well. And again, here's the information. Look, this was done with a red one back then. It used ARRI Master Primes, and it was printed on Fuji Eterna film. And it was a 2:40:1. And of course, you have a huge article. This is like 10 pages long, you know. Let's go to a more recent one, which would be The Mandalorian. Not only the article has a lot of information, but you have also photos from the set. Again, this is the back projection setup that they had on The Mandalorian with live projections. Obviously, even when you look at this, there's still a lot of compositing and roto to be done, because obviously the floor needs to be patched up. Still need to remove all these rigs from the scene. You still have to remove a lot of things. And the cool thing about these kind of articles, it even has actually the specs of the screen. Look at that. The LED volume was actually screens with 1,800 nits. That's like twice as much almost as an HDR nit, okay? Usually an HDR TV has 1,000 nits. These panels were 1,800 nits. And basically they are the equivalent, you know, at 800 ISO f8 of 168 foot candles. These are really good information, especially for people that are trying to light a shot in CG, okay? At the end of the article, obviously the article talks about, I don't want to spoil the film to anyone, of course, but again here, very useful information. They shot it on 2:49:1 anamorphic digital capture. They used an ARRI Alexa LF. It was an open gate. That means they were using a 4:3 open gate with ARRI RAW at 4.5K. So it wasn't 4K, it was a bit bigger. And then they used Panavision Ultra Vista Panavision lenses. And these are, they have a skews. They are anamorphic lenses with a 1.65 skew. So again, if you want to match something, if you want to be inspired by this film, you have these kind of informations on this article. Again, I'm not going to waste more time about this, but you should really look into the American Cinematographer. I've been reading this magazine for years now. Very important magazine for my career. Very important magazine for the visual effects industry, I believe. And then as a quick suggestion, if you really want to go into photography and really good cinema, you should watch Tarkovsky films. And I really would advise you to buy this book. This is Films, Stills, and Polaroids and Writings from Tarkovsky. And Tarkovsky, of course, is very famous from Solaris. He's very, like I have a bunch of films here from him. He's one of my favorite directors. You know, he's very famous for Mirror, of course. He's very famous for The Sacrifice as well. He's very famous for Nostalgia as well. But I guess the film that he's most famous, also I would say Andrey Rublev as well. But I guess he's mostly famous from this film, Solaris, which is one of his best films. Again, his films are amazing in terms of editing, atmospheric, in terms of set design, in terms of acting, in terms of cinematography. They're just mind-blowing. But for me, if we're going to talk about cinematography, this film is absolutely stunning. Ivan's childhood. This film is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen in my life in terms of photography. And then, of course, last but not least, probably what is his most famous film, which is Stalker as well. So I think if you want to learn more about cinematography and really become a really good lighter, you should look at these films. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because of this book. Like, this was a gift from my wife. Anna gave me this book on my birthday a few years back. And the book is really cool because it not only has a lot of articles, of course, which is really cool, but I'm just going to go to the pages here. It actually has frames from the film, which are amazing references. Just look at this. Look at this composition, man. If you can ever do a CG scene like this, Jesus, then you are hired on the spot. He has a bunch of frames from his films. This is from Ivan childhood. Again, if you can make any of these matte paintings on atmospheric lighting, you are going to be higher than a gypsy. Amazing composition. These are frames from the film. You also have some Polaroids from the film, especially this. This is one of my favorite shots from the film. Beautiful frame. The reason I'm showing all this is because these are the books that formed my knowledge. These are the books that made me the artist I am today. I know for a fact that I'm only good at composition and I'm only good in compositing because of these books, because of my study of the art and my study of cinematography and my study of lighting. That's why I can make a good image. That's why I can make a good composite. I feel like it's really super important for you to understand that it's all about inspiration. It's all about references. This is probably the most crucial lesson for today. You have to learn from the best to become the best. I think that's the way it goes, And if you don't study what happened in the past, and if you don't study the big masters of cinema, the big masters of lighting, the big masters of photography, how can you ever be a master? How can you ever be a good photographer, I mean, some of these frames are just like mind-blowing. And I wish I could ever make something even closer to this. I'm trying to find, just to wrap up, I'm trying to find a photo here from The Sacrifice. Where is it? Which is beautiful. I love it. Should have marked this book as well. It's been a while since I read it. Look at that. This is just beautiful. This is just a beautiful frame. Anyway, I'm not going to spend more time on this because we're going to wrap up the stream soon. Tarkovsky, film stills, Polaroids and writings from Thames and Hudson. It's a pretty big book. It's like a thick book. It's hardcover. Not sure you have it digitally. Not sure. But it is a mind-blowing book from a filmmaker that died so young, man. He died so young and he made so few films. It's a shame. I think he only did like 10 films or 12. It's such a shame. He died, I think he was like 50-something or 60 when he died. Such a sad thing that he never showed us more films, It's the same with Kubrick, He died when he was like 70. I'm sure he could have done films until he was 80 or 90, but that's how life works, man. Life is like this, and it's people die. I guess it is like that.